Hello, Renegade marketers. As I've referenced on this show many times and crystallized in my new book, Renegade Marketing, being a CMO today is really, really hard. But the successful ones are truly the cool cats of marketing. CATS being an acronym for courageous, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. And lest you think the CATS framework only applies to previous guests, I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, Evy Lyons, the CMO of Traackr, an influencer marketing platform. Hello, Evy.
Hi, Drew. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Where are you?
I am in Denver, where it is very snowy and beautiful.
Nice. We're having a crazy spring here in New York City. It's sunny, warm, and no snow to be seen. So who knows? So let's start with explaining Traackr to my 95-year-old dad. How would you describe the company without using any technical terms?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So I would say to your dad, what was the last thing you bought? And maybe he would tell me about a tool that he bought for woodworking or something for his car. And I would say, where did you hear about that? And he might say, oh, my neighbor had been using this wax on his car and his car looked great. And I asked him where he got it. And I said, that's what Traackr does. We enable the wax companies to be able to create that sort of word of mouth marketing at scale on the social networks that have taken over the word of mouth channel today.
Okay, just to be clear, a lot of, probably most of your customers are B2C brands. I notice you have a lot of cosmetic brands. Is there anything in that the B2C brands are doing in influencer marketing that the B2B marketers should be thinking about?
The biggest difference by far, I think, between B2C and B2B influencer marketing is the scale. There are just so many more influencers covering topics related to consumer products, whether that is cosmetics or fashion, fitness, you name it. And also, I think in many of those domains, there are truly experts, but it is a lot easier to become an expert. When you look at B2B and we're talking about IT or security or fintech, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to build up that expertise. And so there's just a lot less. However, what I think B2B has been trying to do more and more of in general is become more creative, become more bold, and find those opportunities to stand out because everybody is using the same tactics these days. And so I think that a B2B brand looking at a B2C company doing influencer marketing can maybe get some ideas about how to creatively partner with folks outside of their organization to create interesting content and experiences to reach their audience in an engaging.
And this happened in B2B influencer, actually is a subject that I know a fair amount about, and I'm just going to pipe in here because I have been approached many times and actually worked as an influencer for a number of companies on a very up and up basis. They will call and say, hey, Drew, come to our conference and just write about it, participate, do whatever you want to do. And what I have found for the B2B brands that really do it is they do a couple things. One, they bring you information that would have been hard for you to get. So that's part one. So you have access. Mm-hmm. And then part two, they bring you together with other influencers who help build community. And just thinking about a program as part of with IBM maybe 10 years ago, and they even gave it a name, and it was a wonderful thought leaders, or we were something genius-like, and it was cool to be part of it. Since then, I've seen it evolve, and you see a lot more micro influencers in B2B who have just one little niche. And again, though, what I find is the senior marketer actually engages and really does think about where's the win-win for the person. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. Well, exactly, we're not talking about that. We're going to talk about your brand strategy. We're going to start with courageous strategy. And you've been there 5 years or so. So talk a little bit about how the strategy for the company has changed and where you've landed in the last, say, 18 months.
I have been back at Traackr for 5 years. What's interesting is I was actually with the company in 2012 in the early days for a period of time. And honestly, I think it's interesting because the philosophy for what I'm doing today started then. And also a little bit of context, Traackr was founded over 10 years ago, which was before Instagram existed. So if you can just think about the journey of influencer marketing in your own life over the last 10 years, and then imagine how much this practice has evolved, and also obviously the technologies to support it. So oftentimes marketers, when they're launching a new company, they're part of an early stage, everyone's first assumption is that you should invest in product marketing. And in many cases, that is the right move. But if you are creating a category where people don't even fully understand the practice and thus what technology might be able to do for them, you have to start with content marketing and you have to start with education. And that is really the foundation of what we do at Traackr.
Interesting. So having watched it evolve, obviously it has changed tremendously. You're right. When I think about consumer influencer today, Instagram and TikTok are two of the leading categories or channels, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's changed a lot. And when we started, people were like, wait, what is influencer marketing? And so the strategy originally was all around explaining what is influencer marketing and why should you care? Right. And once we got to that point, and so when I came back, so 5 years ago, things had completely changed and our buyer had completely changed. And we had gone from selling very small value contracts to agencies, which were admittedly the first to get on board with influencer marketing, really saw the potential, to selling, to the enterprise, the global enterprise, and specifically consumer facing brands. And that's a really hard segment to stand out in. They are bombarded. They have great spam filters. They're getting your emails, your SDR emails aren't getting through. They're just very busy people and everyone wants their business. And how can you break through? And I was like, okay, what at Traackr truly sets us apart? And I actually think in many cases, this is true for many of the marketers listening, our platforms are a huge source of data and insights. In fact, in many cases, our platforms offer technology to accomplish a workflow, but also in that process help generate data or insights on data that you have already. And at Traackr, we have a large database of global influencers across all different segments and all social platforms and in all these, in different countries. And so I was like, okay, how can we leverage that data to show instead of tell the value of Traackr? And that was what I really leaned into. And we created a program called the State of Influence, which we use our own data to create insight reports on different industries and produce those on a regular basis and use them, across all of our marketing channels. That sort of speaks to the account-based or the verticalized focus we've taken as well.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. So we're going to go back to a few things. So first, it was interesting as you were talking about early days, you were selling the category because you had to get people in there. So that was an interesting observation and things for folks, whenever you're in this situation where you're trying to get people to change behavior and they haven't done it before, you're often selling the category and that's a little bit tricky. Okay, part two, you mentioned marketing to marketers and how challenging that is. And by the way, I have so much admiration for marketer to marketers, and we have several in CMO Huddles because they're really good. You have to be you can't blow smoke at smoke blowers. You have to find the insight and the value that will get their attention. And so you started to talk about the State of Influence report, and then you talked about vertical. Talk about how those two things come together.
I believe you have to be very specific to your audience. You have to meet them where they're at. You have to figure out what questions are they asking and how can you uniquely answer them and bring them value. And it's really hard to do that if you're not getting specifically into their heads, into their industry. And so that's why I decided to take a very verticalized and ultimately it was an account-based strategy to our demand generation, which was fueled by this content, the State of Influence. So what we did was we gathered up all the accounts we wanted to go after. We benchmarked them among influencer content, and we pulled out insights in terms of what's working for you, what's working for your competitors, and what can you learn from that. And hey, by the way, like, what if this data was at your fingertips every single day as you were making decisions about your influencer program? And we admittedly started this off as quite the hack. It was just two of us on the marketing team trying to pull this together with very little support. And all of a sudden, our cost per leads, and we put these reports out, and our cost per leads on LinkedIn were like $15 a lead, and the quality was off the charts, and our sales team was like more and more. And that's an exciting moment as a marketer.
So I want to make sure I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper. You have this data already because of your system, right? And
Yes.
so you're taking this data, and I know that what's one of your largest clients, cosmetics?
L'Oreal,
right? So you're going to, let's just say Revlon, for example, and you're saying, hey, here's some really cool information that's happening in your category. And I guess the question is, there's no doubt you have the information, but how are you getting that information in front of those folks? And actually, I shouldn't go there yet because that's execution. But as we wrap up the strategic portion of this area, what do you think differentiates Traackr? In theory, every other influencer platform has information and so forth that they can use and so forth. What is differentiating your brand?
I think it is the depth and the breadth of the data that we've created. And it comes from a couple of different technological choices that we've made in terms of how influencers get into the Traackr database, how the platforms that we've chosen to include, and just the fact that, hey, we've been around for 10 years, so we have a lot more to work with. And also, I would say it's a benefit. It's a really nice virtuous circle. The larger customers you have, the more influencers they want to work with, the more data that you start to amass as well. But anybody can have the data. It's about figuring out what in the data is interesting and how in your application, and this speaks to the value of our product, of course, but like the product team figuring out how to add the most value to your customer and what are they looking for and how do they surface that in the product. And I think a challenge in B2B marketing, especially to the enterprise, is as marketers, we don't have the luxury of allowing people a free trial, or we can't necessarily let you in and you have to talk to a salesperson to find out more. And that might be changing. There's certainly a lot of buying dynamics. And I think that's really important as marketers for us to stay on top of and figure out how can we evolve and meet buyers where they are. But that's a challenge and that's a limitation that I have to face. And so I'm always asking strategically, how can we show more versus tell? How can we let you experience this product through marketing in a way that helps you understand the value and brings that to life? And I do want to just touch a little bit more on the strategy. What started as a report and a PDF has evolved over time into an interactive content experience, which now allows you to, as the receiver of this content, to explore on your own and dig deeper versus just reading an insight report. And I think that evolution is really interesting.
It is interesting. And it's so one of the advantages that any company like yours, which aggregates a lot of data, is the data has tremendous value. And part of what you're selling is, hey, if you had this data, you'd be able to make better decisions. And so being able to show it one way or another and turning it into marketing makes tremendous sense. Let's wrap up this section and just would you say that Traackr is a purpose-driven organization? And if so, what's your brand purpose?
Yes, our purpose is to make marketing better. And that purpose, that starts at the founding of the company. Our CEO and co-founder, a self-described recovering marketer. And what he means by that is he, in his early career as a marketer for large CPG, feels as though marketing was just this push function. We have a message, we have an advertisement, we want to get in front of it, you've got to read it, we're going to just bombard you. And what excites Traackr, what excites him and what excites Traackr is this idea that marketing can be human driven. And there's a lot of different opinions out there about influencer marketing. We have always come from the vantage point of influencer marketing is most effective when it's authentic. And we're going to build a technology that enables authentic marketing at scale. So what the purpose is to enable better marketing. That is certainly core to what we do. And I would say that as a marketer, marketing to marketers in a space called influencer marketing, I am very in tune with the challenges that exist out there. There are issues of diversity in influencer marketing, pay discrepancy, for example. Influencers and brands both have a tremendous ability to dictate societal norms, help us shift societal norms. And so in our marketing, we do a lot to touch on those really tough topics and make sure that our industry is having important conversations. So there's a kind of a two-layer answer there for you.
It's great. I actually talk about this too. I believe that marketing can change the world. I believe that marketing at its best is, in the words of McCann Erickson, the truth well told. If you can do it in a way that is actually delivering value along the way, it's better for everybody. As I think about the purpose of making marketing better, I couldn't help but wonder, are you guys using influencer marketing to market your influencer platform?
It's a great question. We have in the past, especially in the early days. And in the early days, a lot of our customers were actually B2B brands. And at the time, if everyone could just go back and remember, it was the rise of the Twitter analyst and the blogger analyst. And everyone was saying, oh, Gartner is not going to exist anymore. Forrester, oh, they're all going to disappear in favor of these new independent analysts who now have a platform. And we were wrong. Forrester and Gartner are still here, but these independent analysts also have a place too. So in that world, yeah, we definitely did a lot of influencer marketing. Back in the day, I worked on a book called The Engagers. It was really cool. We had Lee Odin, for example. Everybody was like a superhero, and what was their superhero? And these people were very formative in the early days of Traackr. And as our customers have evolved, so have our influencers. And so today, the types of people that are influencers for Traackr tend to be a lot of independent, like agency owners who are very open and talking a lot about the practice of influencer marketing. There's also this really interesting profile, and these are really fun people. They work for a brand like L'Oreal, for example, or Charlotte Tilbury, another cosmetics company. And then on the side, they have 10, 15,000 Instagram followers, and they have this whole other persona. So those are some of the influencer groups that we go after. There's an elusive one that I don't think we've cracked yet, and I call it the CMO Whisperer.
Who could that be?
And I think that's a whole group of people who, really have the ear of the CMOs in these larger organizations, advising them and guiding them. And that's something that we're working on.
Maybe being on this show is part of that initiative. Who knows? All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to dive into a little bit more in the executional area. So speaking of CMO Whisperer, if you don't mind, I'd like to plug CMO Huddles for a second. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as timely conversations with smart peers in a trusted environment, while another called it a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. If you're a B2B CMO that can share, care, and dare with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com or hit me up on LinkedIn to see if you qualify for a guest pass. Okay, we're back and we're talking about influencer marketing. We're talking about whether or not Traackr needs to be doing more influencer marketing on their own, but of course they're on the show, so maybe they are, I don't know. But we started to get into this bridge from strategy to execution in this world of ideation. And you talked about the state of influencer as more than just a study, but as a platform, if you will, for a lot of your marketing activities. Talk a little bit more about how you take that, and you talked about ABM, if you will, and vertical markets. Talk about how you would use that from a vertical marketing standpoint.
So basically, we had this idea of using our data to create insight reports by vertical. We called it the state of influence, and we did the state of influence in beauty, in skincare, whiskeys. That was a very popular one. We did them in all of the different sort of areas. And at first we were flaring. We had 9 verticals we were testing out at one point, and we were looking for where we would get that traction. And it was tricky because it was not just marketing traction, but also pipeline and sales. Was it because this program was incredibly successful. When you have interesting data, you've got to find a way to share it, because that is the easiest way for you to break through the noise and reach your target audience. But of course, the question isn't, can you generate leads? It's, can you generate pipeline that converts? And as we followed that chain, we noticed that the beauty industry in particular and personal care was one of the top performing for us. And so we really decided to triple down on that. But I think what's interesting is to maybe talk a little bit about how the content itself evolved. So like I said, this started off as quite the hack. We found hacky ways to export the content, begging for help from the data team, for example. And because the content, the data isn't necessarily going to be super accessible to you in the way that we needed it. So we would create these reports and in Keynote, and they looked good, but they certainly weren't, I wouldn't call them professional. And they started this lead gen program. As we saw the success, one of the things that we decided to do was to, okay, how can we turn this instead of a PDF into an interactive app? And actually, there was a recent study that came out that I think they surveyed over 170 CMOs and found that those that invested in interactive content were 72% likely to meet or exceed their targets, their sales and marketing targets. And I thought that was really interesting. I think a lot of people think about content as an ebook, as a report. And I think for me, what's been really important is to think about content as an experience. And that experience might be a white paper, it might be an event, but it might be an interactive app. But we took that beauty data and we turned it into a ranking where anybody can come and compare themselves to a couple of their competitors and dig into what's working there, what could work for me. And I think that this execution is really interesting because it's like marketing starting to own products as an asset. And that is really exciting to me.
And okay, so I now want to zero really in on this in detail, because I so agree with you that data can be used and turned into an experience. And I'm just so tired of reports. And honestly, we do a lot of research at Renegade for a lot of clients, and we find really good information, but it tends to stop at the written report. Maybe we'll do an infographic, there'll be PR around it. And we got it. Look, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value, but if you can take it one step further and turn it into something that the site visitor can then search and find and customize. So let's get into the nitty gritty of this. What did it, you started saying it was a hack, but if I were to go to leaderboard.traackr.com, take us back to how long did it take to build it? What were some of the things that you learned on the way to create interactive data?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to, my team is probably going to roll their eyes when they hear this, but I am a huge believer in the brief. You need to start with a very clear vision of what you're attempting to accomplish. And so we started with a brief. We described the end state. What do we want to happen? We had to work internally to figure out a way to get the data. In a dream, you have an API and you can maybe connect these two systems and it's seamless. We couldn't negotiate for engineering resources, and I understand that, but we were able to figure out a way to export the data. And so what ended up in the end is every month we have to export and then upload it to our own app. It's a little bit manual, but it's down to about an hour a month of time for somebody. As you're trying to figure things out, as you run into roadblocks, oh, hey, engineering's not going to do that for us. Okay, what else can we do? You have to be able to push through those obstacles and find solutions. And I think you have to be okay with a little bit of manual work as well. But we were, describing what we wanted. We were troubleshooting things. We found a developer to work with. Again, I think here, you as a marketer, you really have to think like a product person. And that's a whole nother skill set but I think is really important for marketers to add to their arsenal, having that product management sort of mindset to be able to think about all the different pieces. And I think in general, marketers have that intuitively, because doing anything, even an event, for example, is like this major lift that you can compare in many ways to launching a product. But yeah, we had to find the people to help us build it. We have a consultant who works with us on all of our brand assets. He was able to design the interface. And I would say from, idea to launch was 3 months.
Okay, so it's 3 months. It's essentially, as you described it, it's an application that lives on the web. You continually update with new data, and consumer prospects or customers can go in and essentially run their own reports.
Yeah, they can basically, the data is available there. They can see a ranking of their industry, and they can sort it by different KPIs that are important in their industry. So things like, we have a score called a brand vitality score. It's this overarching metric of how your brand is doing among influencer content. You can rank it by who has the best influencer loyalty, for example. So which brands are mentioned the most number of times per influencer, things like that. So they can sort by different categories to see who's performing the best. And then they can also select themselves plus others to compare, and then dive into, okay, specifically like how many influencers is Revlon working with? And of those influencers, how many are small, medium, large, extra large celebrity kind of style? And get like these types of insights of, oh, okay, they're heavily investing in mid-size influencers. Maybe that's something I should do. Or maybe that's it. I would like to know more about that. Oh, great, we can do that. Let's talk to us. So yeah, that's how it works.
So I started with the CATS framework, and T is for thoughtful execution. And this is like a quintessential example of thoughtful execution. If you start and just say, is this a value to your customers? The answer is yes. Is this a value to your prospects? The answer is yes. And what I love about it, there's also this, if you go in there and you get what it was called your Traackr score or your influencer loyalty score, and it's low, you know what? Help them self-identify the problem. And so in many ways, then once they go in there and they see that data and they say, oh, we're not where we want to be, I'm imagining they want to talk to you.
Yeah, and they do. And it was really exciting to see the impact of this. In the first 6 months, we generated $1 million in pipeline of that. And our win rate on that is about 40%. So you can see the impact of that. And that was I'm just looking at the first 6 months. It's been more since then as well. And I will also step back and say, like, that's great. And that might seem small to some folks, depending on the size of their company. For us, that's very significant. But I think also we took one segment and we tested this out with one segment. So imagine doing that sort of across your segments too. And obviously that's something that we're working on, and now is expanding this as well. Another benefit that I think, that if you just keep peeling back, like how did we drive that pipeline? This type of asset is a huge benefit to your sales development team, who, these teams are out there grinding, trying to break through, and often, but they only have, for the most part, what marketing gives them to work with. And of course, their own creativity, but they need assets to work with, and they need to be able to show value. And can you imagine being an SDR who can just say, hey, I wanted to show you some of this data. Did you know you're performing here and that your competitors are here? Would you like to find out why? Like, that type of email is opened, it's responded to. We have SDRs emailing CEOs and CMOs and getting, hey, yes, absolutely, I would like you to talk to my team, passing that along. And that's exceptional.
Yeah, it's like, how can you pass up that opportunity for someone to tell you an insight about your business that you didn't know? The other thing that, it's funny, a lot of different things are coming together in my mind. I want to break them down. One, you mentioned 40% win rate. We did for CMO Huddles, we had a bonus huddle with Andy Paul, who wrote a new book called Sell Without Selling Out. And he was lamenting the fact that the average in the industry and a close rate is 1 in 5. And so when you think about pipeline, you say, we've got to get 5 opportunities into pipeline because sales is only going to close 1 in 20. And it's so problematic because, first of all, it means you're failing 80% of the time. It's so depressing. No wonder SDR, these are sales development reps, just in case you're not keeping up with the acronyms at home, but you're losing 80% of the time. That's no fun. That's why you quit your job after a year and go into another career, because that sucks. 40% is a lot better. And what that means is that now you only need 1 in 3 leads, really. And maybe it's 1 in 2.5 per SDR. And that makes it so there's several good things that are happening that are of value in this value chain. You're taking information that you already have and reprocessing it so that it's easy for a salesperson to put it in front of a customer or prospect. You have it online in a way that they can discover on their own. And this speaks to, let's face it, Amazon has affected all of us. We all want to be, for the most part, we'll do everything ourselves up until the end where we need to talk to a sales rep because we have questions, but we really don't want to talk to a sales rep. We want to talk to an expert who has information that will help us make the decision. And so it's funny, I think it probably changed the nature of the conversation that you're having. It's like, how could we do influencer marketing better? Not what platform should we be buying?
Absolutely. And that's the conversation that we want to be having. And that is, as in any market, especially those of us who are in saturated markets with a lot of different providers, that's the game you want to play. You don't want to be having a feature battle. You want to be talking about, hey, this is the expertise we've built up, and we can help you achieve your dreams and your goals. And let's talk about that. And that's a really exciting conversation to have.
Yeah. And I'm imagining that certain categories are all in, and other categories, like cosmetics is one that's so obvious that, let's face it, influencer is huge. It is why celebrities and celebrity models are in every ad. And I'm thinking perfumes and those things, any of those, the health and beauty aid world. But you started to say that you're expanding this. And I wanted to make 2 points about that. One is, in my book, I talk about Test to Triumph. It's chapter 12. And really the whole idea is take 10 to 20% of your budget for experimentation. When you started this thing, you didn't know if it would be big or not. It was a hack as you described it, but now it's working. So you're investing more in it. Talk about the growth of this program and how many verticals are you starting to develop the content for?
Yeah, and I think one of the key investments we've made was bringing in a content marketing director who had this experience with data analysis, which it's a unique skill set and not something that you necessarily think about when you're hiring for content marketing. So that was one of the big investments that I realized we needed to make in order to scale this program. Because in addition to the app, we also produce all sorts of ancillary content, whether that's for social or it's events and presentations or blogs and white papers, of course, yes. And I think that's another page that B2B can take from B2C, is that you need all the content, you need a lot of format, and you need to keep up with that. But the people are important when you're developing the content. That's for sure. In terms of expanding to other verticals, it's become a very much a company strategy. And so what started as marketing testing out where we have this kind of maybe too broad of an ICP, let's start narrowing this down a little bit and doing that through trial and error, has now become a company-wide initiative where, whether you're product, sales, marketing, engineering, we're all aligned in trying to figure out where is that next vertical for us to really double down on. So that's been interesting too. I love what you say though about having 20%. I think 20 on the high end, we should go high end for experimenting. Whatever is working today in marketing is not going to work in 3 months. And if you don't have that steady source of experimenting, it's scary.
Yeah, it really is. So there are a couple of things, and I could summarize. I'm going to use the CATS framework for a second. So if we start with courageous strategy and we say part one of courageous strategy is you are recognizing that marketing can be good. It doesn't have to be bludgeon saturation message. It can actually bring value. And that stems from a purpose as an organization. When we got to the artful ideation, I thought what was so interesting is, let's see if we can stretch this data into something that's a little more interesting, presented in a way, but you have your brand guy to make sure it's still on brand. And then when you got to thoughtful execution, this thing became a home run to me. I find I got it completely in that if you can provide value, and again, I'm repeating myself, but it's so interesting. This is a program that started small that is becoming bigger and bigger. One of the reasons it's successful, and this goes back to strategy, is so we're going to go after one vertical and we're going to deliver information to them that they probably can't ignore because you're giving them a score that says, you're not doing as well as you thought. And then that's something that irritates, that wakes you up. And then we get to scientific method, and you gave us the data on your win rate and the deal flow that has resulted in this. Now I'm imagining there's a lot of business that's happening elsewhere that isn't through this program. And so it might be an exaggeration to say that the program was driving, a huge percentage of pipe. But as you look at why it worked, you're saying, oh, we could do this, we could replicate this, and we can expand it. And the way you're expanding it, vertical market to vertical market, makes so much sense. And I think really, as vertical's been around forever from a B2B standpoint, but it's a discipline to stick with, because if you got a bunch of salespeople who are out there hunting, they might go out of that ICP, ideal customer profile. They might go, these guys will talk to me. And that doesn't help, right? Because if you can get 10 cosmetic brands, you own the category suddenly more than anybody else, and you are the brand. And similarly, as you work your way through it, so many things I admire. Is there anything that you've tried in this program that didn't work that you're fixing in the iterations come future?
I think we're always asking ourselves how it could be better, and how can we deliver more value? How can we make it easier to understand to those who are coming in newer to this, right? If you're talking to an influencer marketing manager, they might get it right away, but the CMO might need more context or different types of information. We haven't had anything that has just not worked at all, where we're like, oh my God, but we are constantly asking, how can this be better? And I think, how can we deliver more? And I think that's the important question to me. How can we continue adding more value? Maybe to the point where what we're doing is a product in and of itself. Maybe it's something that the company decides to actually charge for, or maybe it's something that's always free, but maybe we're single-handedly turning this into a product-led growth strategy without really trying to do that from the beginning. But it's just a natural evolution. One thing I didn't touch on is that we've been doing this for a number of years now. And one of the most exciting results is that these reports generate so much press for us. And I keep waiting for it to stop working. And it's not. And I'm still not going to rest on those laurels, but it's incredible. And what it's helped us do is not just land coverage for these reports, but create relationships with journalists, so that when they have a need for data, they come to us. And I think that's another thing that as B2B marketers and marketing leaders, everybody wants that coverage. They want to be mentioned where it matters most, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. And that is not easy to get, but we've been able to achieve that type of coverage because of the quality of the data, but also the rhythm of the data. And that it's become expected now, and people wait for it and are excited about it.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. If you are going down the road of market research and doing benchmark studies, got to do it annually at minimum. And when you do it annually, here's the thing, you'll find out initially from the first one whether there's any PR juice to it. But you can get more coverage the second year and the third year and the fourth year, because as you said, you built relationships, the data is credible. And it gets more credible year after year, and the story keeps evolving, right? Maybe one brand is winning this year, made a gain, and so forth. And by the way, you're given the type of data that you have, your customers and your prospects are involved in it too, which is a good thing for them. All right, this has been amazing. I'm wondering as we wrap it up, and if you were to talk to a bunch of CMOs about developing a data-driven content program that ends up with this kind of interactive experience that generates PR. One big lesson learned is keep doing it year after year. But is there one more big lesson learned that
I think you should act as if you're the CEO of a small company that's doing this, and think about it as a product. You're building a product and treat it as such. And I think that's why it's been so successful, is we've really approached it the same way that a product leader would approach building a product. And I think even if you're not doing interactive content, I think bringing that sort of mentality to your content in general is just going to elevate the quality of it. And there's no shortage of content out there. We all know that, but it is easy to stand out if what you produce is of high quality. I am still very optimistic about the value of content. I think as marketers, especially marketing to marketers, we have to educate and entertain, but mostly educate and add value. So that would be my advice.
There it is. All right, Evy Lyons, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Drew.
Don't forget to visit your favorite podcast channel, rate the show. If you enjoyed the show, check out Evy Lyons on LinkedIn and tell her how much you enjoyed being on the show. I'm your host, Drew Neiser. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.